Welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Today in the show, we have Tyeese Gaines. She is an emergency physician as well as a media and branding coach. She wrote the Kevin MD article, 8 Things Physicians Should Know Before They're Interviewed by the Media. Tyeese, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we'll get into your article in a little bit, but first off, can you share your story and your journey to where you are today?
Absolutely. As you said, I'm board certified emergency physician now, but I actually started medical school 20 years ago, which I can't even believe. And between first and second year, I actually left med school when everyone else was going off to do MPHs. I actually went and did a master's in journalism. I had been writing since before I even went to med school, and I started interning for an NBC station while I was in the first year of med school, and really just decided I needed to learn more. I really wanted to learn the craft of journalism. So I did that, finished that master's, came back, finished med school, obviously. And from pretty much that point forward through residency at Yale and onward, worked in news for most of the last 20 years, mostly with NBC outlets, but anywhere from freelance all the way up to full-time positions. And at the same time, I did practice clinical emergency medicine, rose in the ranks of administration, was chair of my department, and then flipped over to urgent care for a while, ultimately opening up my own urgent care, which has since closed in COVID, but kind of had the full breadth of medicine and journalism.
So where did your interest in journalism start?
That's a good question. So I've always had like a creative side, and I found that I could take that and actually weave it in with health and medicine. So even when I was a pre-med, folks would come to me and say, hey, you're taking all these science courses. We have this health topic we want covered. Could you write about that? So I started with a column, like I said, even before I started in med school, and continued that throughout med school and kind of formed a niche. But I would be lying if I said I started out thinking, you know what, I'm going to be this health journalist in the future. It was literally just two loves and me trying to figure out how to put them together.
Especially over the past year during COVID, I think it's tremendously imperative to have that physician voice in mainstream media in terms of interpreting the studies. They're changing so quickly and interpreting all that COVID news that's coming out. In your assessment, what is the status of medical journalism today?
What's interesting is, so I was working full-time actually in news as well as practicing up until the point that I created my media company, Dr. Ty Media. The reason why I created that was kind of to the point that you're alluding to, is that I wasn't really seeing a lot of healthcare providers, particularly physicians, in front of the camera. And for me, that was a problem. I felt like the researchers that actually know the data and the science and the physicians that are actually on the ground needed to be the ones talking about these issues. No disrespect to reporters, but how great to have them. But the issue becomes, we're not always trained to speak in that type of a forum where we're breaking things down, where we're entertaining, as opposed to, like we talk when we're giving grand rounds. That doesn't cut it when you're talking to the news. And so that's kind of what birthed that, the coaching, was realizing we have all these amazing people that have this information. We need to really get them in front of the camera. That being said, to your question, I've loved seeing all the various faces that have been in front of the camera lately. I just would say as tips, if you are talking to the media, just remember to really break it down. I think as healthcare professionals, especially those of us that get used to talking to other health professionals all the time, we forget what the average person understands and doesn't understand. They may even use our jargon, but they're not always using it correctly. So the safest thing, especially, in journalism and news, is just use a 6th grade level. It doesn't mean that you're going to not going to have patients that understand more, or not going to have an audience that understands more. But if you can aim for that level, you're going to get everybody, is the hope. So I would just say, make sure that we're really breaking this down on a lower level, because as much as I'm happy to see my colleagues on the screen, I definitely still get the text and the emails of, I heard this news story, they use this word, but I don't know what that means. And so I still think we have to always work on breaking it down. because, we have all this jargon running around in our head that seems normal, but the average person is like, what are they talking about? Or they're Googling, right? So I say, far as the state of where we are, I really like that we're getting more experts in front of the camera, because that was my passion. That was my reason for doing this for so long, and then deciding to coach, because I wanted more of us to be able to do that, to have that access.
So let's transition now into your Kevin MD article, where you share more tips, and it's titled 8 Things Physicians Should Know Before They're Interviewed by the Media. So what are some other things that you could recommend to physicians when they're being interviewed on a radio, on a podcast, or on television for the first time?
Yeah, so the important thing, and this goes for, this article as well as even the other article I wrote about branding, is before you even sit down for that interview, be mindful of who your audience is, because you're going to answer the questions differently, right? If you are doing more of a trade publication or trade site where your audience is going to be another physician or a dentist or a nurse, right? You might speak differently because they have different interests than if you're talking to, the average Joe Blow at home listening to it. So always remember, who is my audience and why do they care about what I'm talking about? Because they may care about that particular topic for a totally different reason than a fellow physician cares about that topic. Doesn't mean it's any more or less important, but it's your job as the messenger to pivot based on who you're talking to, right? So let's say you're being interviewed by like Men's Health. Well, you probably wouldn't go into a whole explanation about how that disease affects, postpartum women, right? Because that's not your audience. So if you're going to be effective and you're going to take your time to even be interviewed and put makeup on and, buy a ring light, make sure that you're being effective. And the first step in that is always being mindful of who you're talking to, what they care about. It may mean asking a couple people in that demographic because you may be out of touch to what they really are experiencing. But I think that's one of the most important things to do, even before you sit down in the chair, is to know who you're targeting and what are the issues that they care about and how you can be most effective for them.
When I talk to other physicians, one of the things that they're most fearful of is really the delivery on camera. They may have all the knowledge in the world and they may be great in the exam room, but once the camera and the lights are turned on, they freeze. Now, are there any ways that they can practice to become more comfortable when the lights are on?
Yes, absolutely. The key, like you said, is practicing until you get comfortable and what you want to say just rolls off of your tongue. So some people will say practice in the mirror. I think we have all of this technology now. Record yourself, set up the camera, record yourself, basically being interviewed or practicing your answers to the questions that you think you're going to be asked, and see what you do. Do you say 1,000 times? Do you seem too stiff? Even in the age of digital now, we're responsible for our own lighting a lot of the time. So are you, is your lighting right? Do you sound right? Are you talking too fast? Are you talking too slowly? I think doing that a lot of times and really just, making sure that you look and sound the way you want is one of the easiest things you can do. Even better is to enlist the help of a friend or a family member to actually sit down with you and ask you questions and still record yourself, because nothing, let me tell you, nothing is as humbling as watching yourself on camera. I'm sure you know. You think in your mind, oh yeah, I said this, and I think I got my points across, and then you see yourself and you're just like, whoa, that's not what I thought I was projecting, right? Very often a common mistake when people start out is that they're actually way more muted than they think they are. And so a tip is, if you feel like you're just a little bit over the top, you're probably just right, because what you think is high energy isn't coming across the same way to the audience at home. So that, again, is something you would never know until you played it back, because it feels like you're being engaging and you have high energy until you watch it and you're just like, oh my gosh, I was so dull. And then you have to kind of pep it up a little bit. So I think utilizing camera phones or even a regular video camera, if that's what you prefer to use, or a tablet to record yourself, is key.
So I think I can attest to what you said about practice. I'm doing almost 300 episodes of this podcast over the past year, and I really shudder to look at those first episodes. But I can say that the communication skills that I've learned by interviewing guests like yourself, it's really helped me in the exam room in terms of improving my delivery, being a little bit more fluent whenever I give patients advice. So I certainly second that advice. Practice, practice, practice.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
So the next question I want to ask is about breaking into the media industry. And I know a lot of physicians are interested in sharing their knowledge with the public, but they just don't know where to start. Now, what are some recommendations that you have for physicians who want to break into the mainstream media and perhaps have more of those opportunities?
Sure. So I definitely think that geographics makes a difference. So if you are in a community or a city, like a major city that has multiple news opportunities, then you're going to be much better off. My suggestion would say start with your local news, whether that's print slash online,
Hmm.
whether that's television outlets, and kind of start watching and reading who's producing the news content around health topics, because not every place is going to have like a dedicated health producer. It may be your local reporter doing it, but they've been pegged as like the person that does those stories. Or they may mix it up between all of the different reporters, but try to get a feel of who's, doing that coverage. And you could either give them a phone call, you can call the station and ask for them, you can send them a quick email introducing yourself and just letting them know you're interested in doing this and you're available for interviews. That would be a quick, easy way to get started. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to always get a call back. You may have to be a little persistent, but that's one like low hanging fruit way to do, is just see who's doing the coverage in your local community and reach out to them. A lot of times what happens too is if you do some local spots, then national of
Hmm.
whatever that outlet is will pick it up, will identify you as an expert, and then you may then get into national opportunities. Now, if you're in a place like New York or LA, you may be able to get to national outlets a little bit faster by doing a similar method. But definitely, I would say, one, the local outlets are good because you can get more practice in before you get to that kind of prime time outlets, as well as, just getting to know the folks that are in your community. If there are journalists, mixers and networking events. I know with COVID, it's a little bit different now, but if you can do that and network with folks, a lot of the journalists have associations that are dedicated to healthcare journalism, that are dedicated to journalists in general, or some of the different ethnic groups have their own journalist associations. It's just a way to let them know you're around, you're
Hmm.
available, you want to talk about those things. And then the flip side of that is, when you are contacted, if you are contacted, definitely be available. The
Hmm.
worst thing, I've been on the side of reporter and producer, the worst thing is contacting someone and then they're never available to actually sit down in a chair. That will quickly move you to the bottom of the list. So if you really want to do this and you reach out to a reporter or producer and they call you, do your best to get there and then do the best job that you can, because when I say we and me, I'm talking on the journalist side, we're creatures of habit. If we invite you on and you do a great job, we will continue to call you because we like known entities. So definitely make sure that you show up, you do your best, and that you make yourself available. If they call you a couple of times and you're never available, it's probably going to make the chances of them calling you again less likely.
We're talking to Tyeese Gaines. She is an emergency physician as well as a media and branding coach. She wrote the Kevin MD article, 8 Things Physicians Should Know Before They're Interviewed by the Media. Thais, what are some of your take-home messages that you want my audience to come home with?
Sure. So the main take home that I want other healthcare professionals to really get is just that whether you're building yourself up as an expert, whether that's in the news or social media, if you have a product that you're selling, if you're growing your practice in a particular community, is that it's not enough to just build it. You have to really understand marketing. You really have to understand what it means to have a brand, who your target audience is, and how you're going to get to those folks and deliver what it is that they want. Long gone are the days of I'm just going to be great and everyone's going to love that I'm great and come see me, even for patients, right? I
Hmm.
mean, now it's like patients are Googling, they're looking at your reviews, they're looking at your websites, your social media accounts. It's just a different ball game. So it's not enough to just build it. You really have to focus on what your brand entails and how you target it.
And how can people reach you?
Sure. So on Instagram, I'm dr.tyegaines. Also, Dr. Ty Media. Doctor is all spelled out. We're on all of the different social media platforms. If folks want to learn more, I put up tips every week about branding and media on the Dr. Ty Media page. And also, we have a course right now going with a boot camp for any healthcare professionals that want to work on launching their brand.
Dr. Ty, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. And thanks again for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.